be silent now. Maybe you think it's more humble to concede, but this isn't about pride. This is about crime. Election fraud is a crime. It destroys democracy. Accepting it encourages more of it. This is not. That's not a beer. This is not just your fight. This is not just your fight, Mr. Kim. It's the people's fight. It's about every citizen's right to vote. So please withdraw your concession to join us. 2020, I flew to Washington to speak the truth right here on this stage, at this podium. I stood alone. My words felt like a cry in the wilderness, but I still spoke. I even warned America, be aware or be next. And I was right. It took President Trump 4 years, but he's back. Today, I return to the same podium, but I'm
Testing mic check.
I stand with President Trump,
Check.
President Yoon of Korea, and former Prime Minister Hwang. I stand with
Just a little bit the volume higher.
John
Thank you.
Mills, Colonel Grant Newsham, and Professor Bradley.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll get started in about 5 minutes. In the meantime, please silence your phones or turn it off. Thank you.
Fair.
So you're related to Sylvanus theory? Yes.
Fair.
Not everyone.
Fair. History will remember them. Right now it's 1 a.m. in Seoul, and yet patriots are gathered at Seoul City Hall. 근데 서울역에 있는 거야?
네.
저희가 아니고 시청이 아니고?
네, 서울 스테이션.
Seoul Station, watching this press conference live. Their courage brought us here, and I'm especially moved by the young people in their 20s and 30s who are now standing up. They give me hope. But you must not forget those we lost. Over the last 5 years, 5 brave souls gave their lives in this fight. Kim Il-tu, Kim Kwang-chan, Kim Jae-hong, Pastor Kim Tae-won, and Elder Kwon Tae-hun, who died from illness. 2 died from illness while leading the movement. 1 died in a suspicious crash. 2 set themselves on fire after exposing the truth. Let us never forget them. We are here because of them. Now I speak directly to President Trump. America has spent hundreds of billions of dollars in Ukraine, but is Korea less important? Do we need bullets and bombs to recognize that war is happening in China?
Are we going to translate it in Korea? Are they going to be translating this?
They are with the translators in Korea. So not here, but in Korea.
어.
Do we need bullets and bombs to recognize that war is happening? China has taken control of Korea's government without firing a shot. Can't we see this? President Lee Jae-myung didn't win by chance. This was long strategy with the global communist movement, and now as a popular Beijing, he will sell out Korean sovereignty. Yesterday was the 75th anniversary of the Korean War. 36,000 Americans died to protect Korea's freedom. That freedom is now slipping away. President Trump, you know what election fraud looks like. Now it's happening to your allies. Please act, and act soon. To Congress, don't see this as just a Korean problem.
Yeah.
This
I
is
can't. 네.
this is a global crisis. 아니 조금 있다가
네.
바꾸면.
네. 오케이.
This is a
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
whole hearings.
Good morning. My name is Henry Song, and I want to welcome each and every one of you to a very special and important press conference. Thank you coming on a very hot day to join this press conference in person. And I also want to welcome and extend my gratitude to the thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of online viewers in South Korea, Japan, Europe, all across America. So thank you. So be sure to press like and subscribe button to our KCPAC YouTube channel. Thank you very much. We have a very distinguished and important group of people today who will present on what happened in South Korea on June 3rd and even going beyond that. But more important than that, I have another important announcement, which is that tonight at 6 p.m., the guests from South Korea, former National Assemblyman Min Kyung-ok and attorney Park Ju-yeon, they will be having a meet and greet event at the Korean Community Center. In Korean, it's called Dongpo Gandame, and it's going to be in Korean. So for those of you who prefer Korean-speaking environment, it's a perfect event to come tonight, 6 p.m. at the KCC, Hanin Community Center. So that's another event that we're having today. And one more event that we're having is on Monday, June 30th at 2 p.m. We're going to have a congressional briefing. And I believe this is the first time that the issue of South Korean election integrity will be talked about in Congress, geared towards congressional staffers and members of Congress. It is geared towards members of Congress and staffers, but it's open to the public, and we'll have information about which room in the Capitol building on Monday. So please, if you have time on Monday, I would highly encourage all of you to come out to those events. And I really want to thank all the people that are here today. And today, after the press conference is over, for the members of media that are interested in interviewing our special guests and panelists, you're more than welcome to do so. And I would like to welcome to the podium the moderator for today's conference, Mr. Gordon Chang. So let's welcome him with a big round of applause.
It is a great honor for me to be here today, to be in the presence of brave and strong Korean patriots. Korean patriots in Washington, D.C., all of you, and Korean patriots in the Republic of Korea, in Seoul, at Seoul Station. At Seoul Station, it is midnight, but it is bright. It is bright because you are there, and because you are there, the flame of freedom burns bright in the Republic of Korea. Thank you so much. We are here today to listen to the 4 members of the International Election Monitoring Commission. They looked at the results of the June 3 election. We are also going to hear from 2 Korean experts who have also analyzed election results. We were told that Lee Jae-myung of the Democratic Party of Korea, Minju, won by a wide margin, 8%. But the question is, did he? We have to ask because in the last 3 national elections in Korea, in 2020, in 2022, and in 2024, there was evidence of widespread fraud. And we have to be concerned because Yi himself, he paralyzed the government of President Yoon Suk-yeol with more than 30 impeachment motions. He then engineered the impeachment of President Yoon. And then, after all of that, he then tried to paralyze the post-impeachment government in Seoul. This was an attack on democracy. This was an attack on the Republic of Korea. This was an attack on all of you. We know that free and fair elections are the core of a democracy, which means that this is my struggle. This is your struggle. This is the struggle of all freedom-loving people everywhere throughout the world. Let's get started. And we will start with a member of the monitoring team, Ambassador Morse Tan. Ambassador Tan.
Election integrity is an issue all over the world. It is not limited to one place or locale. And I think the U.S. administration is rightfully looking into the 2020 election here in the United States. And the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, has recently came out with reports and indications of cheating that happened in the 2020 US election. But realize this had a broader dimensions to it than just what was happening in the US. You had planes full of people from the UK, from Hong Kong, from China, from South Korea, where you have non-US citizens bearing fraudulent identification who are coming to cheat and vote in the US 2020 election. And this gets at, together with President Trump's executive order authorizing this investigation, this starts to get at the octopus that is grasping and its tentacles are reaching in many directions, in many countries, all over the world. And when you look at it, there is also another interesting angle here. USAID, which the Trump administration has been doing a great job of dismantling, USAID was supporting an organization based in South Korea called AWEB. AWEB is a web of election fraud enablement. You have 109 countries who are members of AWEB, and AWEB exports the means to cheat in elections all over the world. To just give a few examples, you have the Democratic Republic of the Congo, you have Iraq, you have Kyrgyzstan, you have Ecuador, to give just 4 examples from various continents where AWEB's reach has impacted the elections in those countries. So this is not only an issue relating to the US and US security, this is not only an issue relating to Korea and Korean democracy, but this is in regards to an octopus that is extending its tentacles all over the world. And this is what we are here today about. There are also important broader security considerations that the US must consider in this situation. The Chinese Communist Party, which is seeking actively in a great power struggle, as they say publicly, to displace the US as the lone superpower of the world, who think that they have a right to all under heaven, so not only the whole world, but indeed the moon and Mars are among the places that they have laid claim to. You have a broader struggle going on along these lines. And if you look at these AWEB countries that have been receiving the import of election fraud enabling machinery, what are common factors there? Many of them are very much entangled in the Belt and Road Initiative of the Chinese Communist Party. Many of them are heavily indebted to the Chinese Communist Party as well. In addition, think about what is happening regionally. If the CCP attacks Taiwan, which they are engaged in according to the Indo-Pac commander, they are not engaging in mere exercises, they are engaging in rehearsals for that. Would an Lee Jae-myung-led South Korea be willing to come to the aid of Taiwan? Or has this Chinese Communist Party effectively collapsed the right flank of the first island chain to keep South Korea from coming to the aid of Taiwan if the CCP attacks Taiwan? What else has been going on? North Korea, with a dedicated cyber army, has been engaged in cyber attacks against South Korea and other places. Remember the Sony hack, remember Banco Delta in Macau, a large heist of a Korean bank, ongoing infiltration and cyber attacks on South Korean elections. That has been what North Korea has been doing because their long-standing objectives, and this is very appropriate to remember this right after the 75th anniversary of the Korean War, is that they want to make the South Korean people more favorable to North Korea. They want to get the U.S. less committed or uninvolved with South Korea, and their long-standing objective, which they expressed in the Korean War, which has not ended, is to take over the peninsula by force. There are many CCP and North Korean operatives who are working in South Korea. And so this is some of the bigger picture of what is going on and what is at stake. And this last election in South Korea may have been the biggest election heist ever in all of South Korean history. How was this done? You have the National Election Commission, which also received USAID support. The National Election Commission was the center of operations inside of Korea with respect to this election fraud. The early voting was a major vehicle by which this happened. Unlike the main election day, you did not even have to vote in your own district. So you had reports of people who would vote 2, 4, 6 times with fake IDs, plane loads of people coming to vote, non-Korean citizens bragging on their social media about voting in it, where you have loose ballots that were found in places like restaurants, where you have boxes of ballots that were pre-marked for Lee Jae-myung appearing, according to CCTV footage, for example, where you have an unwillingness, and this is required according to Korean law, an unwillingness to authenticate ballots using a dojang, which is a personal signature stamp. Instead, you have these pre-printed ballots that already have a stamp on them that are not the personal stamp of the election monitor or manager. They are a generic stamp that is pre-printed that does nothing to verify or authenticate the ballots that were there. How is it that you have more votes than registered voters? Sometimes to the tune of 100-something%, 200-something% in certain voting districts. This is literally mathematically impossible without cheating. And yet, you have this deafening silence, this conspiracy of silence in South Korea with the legacy media who will try to be quiet about this or affirmatively attack those who are calling out this cheating. And so they are trying to engage in an intimidation campaign, which is violative of a healthy democracy. There should be freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and freedom to associate, and all these things are necessary in a vibrant democracy. And yet this is being violated as the newly elected, illegitimately elected, fraudulently elected head of state, putatively, Lee Jae-myung, is already going after leaders who are exposing this fraud. For example, you have Hwang Kyo-han, former prime minister, who has been doing great work along these lines. When we met with Prime Minister Hwang, shortly thereafter, there was an illegal search and seizure of his office and a raft of lawsuits that are performing lawfare against him. This is not acceptable. And you also have judicial collusion. You have all these judges who are on the payroll of the National Election Commission, some of whom are supposedly part of the National Election Commission, and then you have these cases brought before these judges, and they are ignoring it. The National Election Commission likes to say, oh, there are 100-some cases, and we won them all, and therefore what we're doing is fine. But the truth of the matter is, in not one of these cases was the evidence either examined or investigation to be allowed. So it's not an issue of the evidence being considered and rejected. It was an issue of the evidence and investigation not being admitted at all. And so this was not a situation where judges were carefully considering things on the merits. These were judges who were not even getting to the merits of the case. And in this situation, as we will hear later, there is a lawsuit that has been filed with over 11,000 plaintiffs, and there is a chance for justice to happen if it happens in a timely way, in a fair way, where they actually look at the evidence, where they actually allow investigation. This can nullify the election that just happened and restore democracy. Because if you don't have free and fair, transparent elections, you don't have a working democracy. And this is something that needs to be taken seriously. President Trump has called for a special prosecutor to look into these election matters. This would properly be extended beyond the confines of the United States, because even the cheating in the United States had elements that were coming in from outside the United States. And we must remember that there's a bigger picture here that needs to be addressed. And we would call on our government and the people of the United States to please look into this, to look at the evidence, look at the report that we put together, and see what is actually happening, because this is too important to sleep through. Thank you. I want to, at this time, mention that there are going to be 2 video clips that will be shown. There will be a 10-minute clip of a video that outlines some of the ways in which the election fraud and the steal happened in South Korea. And then a 2-minute clip. This was actually shown for 30 minutes at New York's Times Square just a couple days ago. And both of these videos, I think, will provide some nice framework and background. I'll have a few comments after that, and then turn it over to the rest of the panel subsequently. I think they're trying to get sound. John Mills was not lip syncing on that segment.
China, who actually flew in a lot of personnel to conduct the election. This was just crazy. It's really led by China and the Chinese Communist Party through this election.
초기에는 믿기 어려웠습니다. 근데 선관위에 대해서 알면 알수록 완전히 외부 통제 없이 스스로 정말 썩어가고 있거든요. 그게 제일 큰 문제라고 생각합니다.
선관위는 부정 채용 비리 같은 게 878건 나오잖아요. 무슨 놈의 비리가 그렇게 많아요?
신이 있어가지고 그 선거 결과를 다 이렇게 만들어 놓은 것처럼 그렇게 보인단 말이에요, 이 결과가.
위조된 투표지들은 중국에서 준비돼서 한국으로 반입된 것으로 보입니다.
동일한 투표용지도 출력할 수 있다.
국정으로 뚫었으면 북한은 더 잘 뚫을 수 있어요.
학자들이 학술적으로 조작 공식을 찾아냅니다. 조작을 입증할 수 있다는 겁니다.
의석수를 훔쳤고
이게 조직적이면 있을 수 없는
결과가 바뀌어버린 겁니다.
The following are the scenarios of election fraud that ordinary Korean people have uncovered on their own. The Democratic Party creates an election blueprint. From this blueprint, they run simulation software programmed on the National Election Commission server to inflate the vote count. The vote count is inflated through several methods such as manipulating electronic counting machines, inserting fake ballots, or switching ballot boxes. The Supreme Court covers up these crimes by nullifying the recount. Of course, this hypothesis cannot be confirmed until the investigative agency forensically examines the National Election Commission servers and computer equipment. However, we believe it is the most persuasive hypothesis after analyzing the evidence collected thus far by citizens in the field, and we will lay out this evidence that supports our hypothesis. Many people were shocked by the results of the 2020 Korean general election, where the Democratic Party won by a large margin despite the even polls. Under Korean election laws, a voter can decide between casting their votes on election day or during the 2-day early vote period. Many citizens suspect that setting aside 2 days for early voting sets the stage for bad actors to perpetrate election fraud. The morning after the 2020 election, a Democratic Party staff member and political strategist posted this on his social media account. A table showing the number 163, which he bragged was the Democratic Party's prediction of the number of seats they would obtain, which later we found was the exact number of seats, along with an exact match in breakdown by constituency. And look at the table's title, Early Vote Manipulation Value. People began to wonder, could there be more to the 2020 general election results? Could it be, as this table suggests, that the early vote had been manipulated and served as a blueprint to the Democratic Party's plan to win the election? As social media users began to question the integrity of the post, it suddenly disappeared. Evidence that the Democratic Party may have planned the election in advance also emerged in the most recent 2024 elections. In an article in the Donga Ilbo, the Democratic Party said it was aiming for an overall voter turnout of 71.3%, including 31.3% in early voting. But even more surprising is that the early voter turnout in the 2024 general election was 31.3%, exactly the same as the Democratic Party's prediction. Based on the opinion polls in each constituency, the predicted voter turnout and the manipulation value, the number of early votes is inflated and distributed to each constituency. And the National Election Commission announced these fake vote numbers, claiming they were the election results.
In the election day vote should be close to the early vote. It is a general rule of statistics. But my statistical analysis of the vote result of the 2020 general election gave me strong confidence that this election is fraudulent.
The blue bar representing the Democratic Party was entirely on the right side of zero, which means in every single constituency, they got more early votes than election day votes. The red Conservative Party, the exact opposite. Not only that, the graph is a mirror image with a 10% shift of votes in either direction. The other minor parties represented by the bars in the middle means their votes were not part of the manipulation.
It is 100% vote fraud, since when I calculated the possibility of this vote result, it turned out to be almost zero. The result of the 2020 general election reported by the NEC is not possible in a real-life election.
Professor Huss said the likelihood of achieving a result like this, with tens of millions of real-life voters, is equivalent to tossing 253 coins in the air and having them all turn up heads. This graph shows the national results of the 2024 general election. Red are the seats won by the Conservative Party, and blue are the seats won by the Democratic Party. In many instances, the Conservative Party won in the election day vote, but as you can see in the early vote, the results were overturned in favor of the Democratic Party. It's especially apparent in the metropolitan area. Despite winning so many constituencies in the election day vote, the early vote results were overturned in favor of the Democratic Party in all constituencies, except 1 in Seochogu and 3 in Gangnam-gu. Had the early vote not been manipulated, this would have been virtually impossible to achieve. In the 2020 general election, many observers reported seeing the conservative candidate winning in the election day vote. But then the results reversed as early vote ballot boxes began to open late at night. You may remember the incident during the 2020 U.S. presidential election when Donald Trump was winning in all the swing states until midnight. But when the mail-in ballot boxes that arrived early the next morning were opened, a flood of votes for Biden poured in, overturning the election results and giving Biden a victory. The National Election Commission's voting manual has a clause that says, cover all CCTVs if installed in the voting locations, which makes it impossible to check the number of early voters or any other illegal activity, such as multiple voting or proxy voting around the voting locations. In the early vote, the exact number of paper ballots distributed to the voters should be drawn and counted from the ballot box. However, in the recent 2024 general election, many constituencies had discrepancies between the distributed and the counted ballots. In some cases, not all distributed ballots were found in the ballot box, while in others, there were more ballots in the ballot box than had been distributed to the voters. A voter turnout of over 100% is clear evidence of rigging, as it was in many constituencies in the 2024 general election. The question now is, how did they actually implement the vote fraud? The simulated results are manipulated at the counting site using electronic counting machines. These are hundreds of ballots from one constituency going through a counting machine. Ordinarily, the ballots should appear in random order. But you can see that they are all marked for the Democratic Party candidate. You may recall from these over 100 consecutive Democratic vote scans the so-called Biden spike, a strange phenomenon that occurred in Wisconsin and Michigan between 4 and 6 a.m. on November 4th, the day after the 2020 U.S. presidential election. When the vote counting, which had been halted around midnight, resumed, a sudden spike in Biden votes was observed. Of the over 100,000 votes counted at that time, more than 90% were for Biden, and similar phenomena that occurred in Korea and the U.S., which defy the basic laws of statistics, can only be explained by election fraud. According to the target votes inflated and manipulated by the NISI computers, fake paper ballots were made and inserted into the ballot boxes. Take a look at this counting clerk separating paper ballots that are stuck together. Why are they stuck together when each ballot is cast separately? The NEC gives a nonsense explanation that the ballots stuck together by static electricity. And this, bundles of votes that look like they just came out from the mint. How is that possible for votes that go through many hands?
This was an edited version, a shortened version. It has maybe 20-some minutes longer, the full version. And if you consider things like this, like it was mentioning the pristine ballots, something that's important to know about that is that the ballots must be folded by law. Legally, it's required for the ballots to be folded. Then how are all these pristine ballots that are unfolded all checked for Lee Jae-myung? How does that happen? There was a nonsense explanation given by the NEC at one point. They said, oh, this is special paper that after you fold it, it bounces back into its original shape. Can I see the patent for that? Who has ever made such paper that goes boing after it's been folded? There's no such thing. This is fiction. And the thing is, it was showing how it kept having the ballots recorded for the same candidate, right, rather than various candidates. In this last election, over 3,000 votes for Lee Jae-myung at a voting place consecutively. What are the odds of that happening? Is that really credible? A real problem with chain of custody, when you have the boxes of the physical ballots, they have to be secured. Because if somebody can add ballots, if somebody can add boxes of ballots, that's clear fraud. And yet, this sort of thing has been captured through photographic and video evidence of the chain of custody not being secured and these added ballots coming there. You know, when we came in, we were open to hearing evidence directly from the NEC, hearing evidence from others who would refute these things. Have any of these things that we've put forward, have they been refuted by anyone? The answer is no. We have heard nothing to refute that. Instead, what they do is they attack the people who are saying these things, and they try to say, oh, they're insurrectionists. Oh, they're election fraud theorists. Oh, they have all these name calling that they do because they don't have a means to refute it, because this is true, and because they can't refute it. Even now, I will welcome them. I will invite them, refute these things. Demonstrate to us, show to us that this is true. This is what we are saying that's false. Open up your system and show the world that what we're saying is false. I would be happy to be wrong. But they have not done that at all. Instead, they are attacking the very people who are trying to uncover the truth and to fight for their democracy. Did you see the passion with which people in South Korea are fighting for their country, for their democracy, for their freedom? We are honored to support such patriots who are fighting for their country. And with that, I'll turn it over to each of the rest of the people on the panel.
Thank you, Ambassador Tan. As we know, in all democratic countries, sometimes there is fraud. The difference in Korea, though, is that those who are meant to prevent the fraud, who monitor elections, are in on the fraud, as we've heard from Ambassador Tan, as we saw in the video. This is the critical difference. The government of Korea is a perpetrator of the fraud of its own elections. In the Times Square video, we heard comments from Colonel John Mills, who is a member of the International Election Monitoring Team. He is here today, and I introduce him.
Thank you for being here today. Annyeonghaseyo to everyone, especially those that are gathered in Seoul Station. We salute you, and we're here fighting for you. What we're dealing with is a national security issue for South Korea, but also for America and every other country out there. We are dealing with an international election fraud cartel. 5 years ago, just down the hallway, I led a cybersecurity forum where I was asked to talk about the security of election machines. Little did I know 5 years later, I would be standing at this podium telling everyone this is an international election fraud cartel. Back then, I had members of the election machine companies on the panel, and they were very assiduous in editing the pre-remarks. And I thought something was up, and yes, it was. We are dealing with an international cartel. And this is, we also have to point our friends in the Philippines. Last year, a huge event that is connected to South Korea and America. A senior representative of the Philippine government complained directly to the Attorney General at that time, Merrick Garland, that a U.S. election machine company was bribing officials in the Philippines to use their machine. Well, that same president of that company, I will not mention the name, has been indicted. It is in trial right now. But that same company that was bribing officials in the Philippines, hardware and software components from that company are in the election apparatus of South Korea. This is an international cartel. You went through it. We've gone through it. Brazil's gone through it. And it's also, as the ambassador pointed out, partly funded by U.S. aid, both to AWEB and the National Election Commission. This gives inroads, if the current administration, American administration, decides, this gives legal and intelligence inroads to begin formal investigation. What is going on at the National Election Commission and AWEB, especially when parts of it looks like it was funded by U.S. taxpayers' monies. So this is absolutely outrageous and must be looked into. This is not to be trusted. We're also, so this is very important, and as the director of the FBI, Kash Patel, has shown fraudulent IDs produced by China in South Korea, in Hong Kong, in the United Kingdom, were brought to the United States to create fraudulent identities, fraudulent ballots. Again, an international election cartel. And there's actually a senior member of the Chinese Communist Party we've identified, Wang Huning. Now, he is the chairperson of the Chinese People's Consultative Conference. It looks like he is very likely the director of this fraud that occurred in South Korea, controlled directly by the Chinese Communist Party. So we actually have a name and a personality who is actually directing an oversight of this fraud. So this is a danger. This is a danger to the world. The National Intelligence Service of South Korea showed the absolute untrustworthiness and vulnerabilities of the National Election Commission. What has been done to correct that? Nothing. Nothing has been done. This is absolutely outrageous. The intelligence service has shown this is absolutely fraudulent. And it really begs the question, there always has to be an independent verification and validation of any government entity in a constitutional republic, and Korea is a constitutional republic. Where is the independent verification and validation of the National Election Commission? There is none. Apparently, the National Election Commission is the government of South Korea. They're unassailable, can't be questioned. No independent verification and validation. This is not what a constitutional republic behaves like. This is wrong. This is wrong. So this is an international cartel. Every one of the United States is dealing with this. And again, the FBI director has opened up investigations. We also have a weaponization of government investigation going on, led by Ed Martin at the Department of Justice. All of these issues in South Korea directly are affecting the United States also. So there is an interest by the United States in what's going on in South Korea. In South Korea, again, we have a bond forged in blood, fire, and steel. South Korea is our closest friend and ally, closer than no one else. They are the closest. We can't let South Korea fall prey to this international election cartel. And what is needed is transparency and auditability. And that's not what's going on. So we have grave concern of what's going on. The election outcome, as was shown statistically, absolutely identical early voting patterns, and early voting that just outvoted day of voting. These are exactly the issues the United States has gone through. So we have to have a trusted process. That's the foundation of a constitutional republic. And it is, unfortunately, the foundations of the Republic of South Korea have been absolutely deteriorated and rotted, and they cannot be trusted. This is a seminal moment in the history of the Republic of Korea, and we must get this correct. Thank you very much. And for everybody in Seoul, fighting!
Colonel Mills has told us that this is a seminal moment. It's a seminal moment for the people in Korea, but as he pointed out, this is not just a Korea issue. This is an issue for the United States, and it's an issue for many nations around the world. This is our seminal moment. Now we are going to hear from two other China experts who are also experts in Korea. And the first is Bradley Thayer. Thank you for coming up here.
Gordon, thank you very much for the warm introduction, and thanks very much to Gordon Chang for moderating. It's a great pleasure for me to be here to join global audiences, of course. The audience in South Korea at Seoul Station, of course, a hearty welcome to you at this time, obviously, on June 27th, of course, in Seoul. It's a great honor to join my esteemed colleagues who were on the monitoring team with me in South Korea, as well as to welcome the insights from our two South Korean colleagues who will provide us with even more granular understanding of what happened on June 3rd and in the early voting before. My focus is on the issue of transparency. Transparency is essential for every democratic government and in every democratic system. Democracy is defined by a social contract. That social contract is citizens provide their loyalty, they provide their fealty to the government, and the government in turn provides standards of good governance, good, well-known principles of the rule of law, of regular, free and fair elections that are also transparent. Open, honest, and transparent elections is essential for stable democracy, and it's their hallmark. As Ambassador Tan has mentioned, as Colonel John Mills has mentioned, and as Colonel Grant Newsom will also address, there have been profound problems in the South Korean election, which cause us to consider this election to be an illegitimate one. This is a particularly essential time in U.S.-South Korean elections. Yesterday, as has been mentioned, was the 75th anniversary of the start of the Korean War when North Korea attacked South Korea. This was a war in which over 1 million South Korean civilian and military casualties occurred, killed, wounded, and missing. And it was also a war in which over 100,000 Americans were either killed or wounded in that war. So at a time of solemn reflection, as we consider the sacrifices made by the South Korean and American people, it's important to consider the actions of the Chinese Communist Party in influencing this election and the behavior in particular of the South Korean National Election Commission, which has been stressed by my colleagues, and rightfully so. The NEC is not transparent. Its problems are profound, and its behavior de facto breaks the contract between the people and government, which is the hallmark of Western democratic systems. The NEC is not transparent in any respect, nor is it accountable to the South Korean government or any other body, international or obviously within South Korea itself. The NEC will not permit an audit of their servers. It will not permit an audit of their software, of their processes, or of their computer equipment. Early voting, as has been mentioned, and as seen in the video that we saw, and that will be discussed in a moment in more detail by our South Korean colleagues, in early voting there were many irregularities. Some of my colleagues have mentioned those, and including evidence of double voting and proxy voting, abnormal ballot papers, mismanagement of ballot boxes, irregularities in the vote counting process, and anomalies in overseas voting, to just list a few of really what is a rogues gallery of gross and fundamental problems in the South Korean election. There were gross irregularities in voting, in early voting, and on voting on election day. Any investigative agency must examine NEC servers and computer equipment in this election, which is part of a broader pattern of behavior in earlier elections, as has been mentioned in 2020, and 2022, and 2024. Transparency is essential for any legitimate democratic government and for the social contract to obtain. When that is eroded, of course, then, of course, the fabric of society, the fabric of democracy begins to wear and to unravel. And the consequences of that, of course, are grave for every democratic society. Therefore, I call on an investigative body to examine these issues and for the NEC and the South Korean government to provide full cooperation to address this issue. The NEC must be reformed to require transparency in all elections, and that has to be supported by the South Korean government, as well as governments around the world and people of goodwill around the world who support democracy wherever it exists. If we do not have that, we run the risks of eliding slowly or perhaps far more rapidly into a totalitarian government. The path to authoritarianism, the path to, in essence, a form of totalitarian control, as witnessed in North Korea, of course, and in the People's Republic of China. So the stakes are grave. The matter is immediate and must be addressed. And I'm very pleased, again, to have been joined by such outstanding colleagues to have the opportunity to address this issue, and to have great thanks, of course, to the National Press Club for hosting us for this occasion. Thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Brad, thank you so much for pointing out what is at stake. We're talking not just about one election in June in one country in South Korea, but we're talking about the erosion of democratic norms and the erosion of democracy itself. And as Brad just told us, what's at stake is the slide to both authoritarianism and even totalitarianism. Because we know that many of Yi's advisors do believe in North Korean norms. In other words, totalitarianism. Thank you so much, Brad. And now we're going to hear from the last member of the election monitoring team, Colonel Grant Newsham, who is an expert, as I mentioned, on the Chinese Communist Party and Chinese infiltration of societies, such as the Republic of Korea. Colonel Newsham.
Okay, thanks, Gordon. Now I'll jump right in. I've been looking at Korean elections actually since 2020, not just this last one. I was asked to go look at the 2020 general election because there had been allegations of fraud, and I was glad to go, and I didn't expect I would find anything. Like a lot of Americans my age, we know that elections sometimes have surprise outcomes. There's that famous picture, at least people my age would remember, of Harry Truman holding up a newspaper that says Dewey wins. And everyone thought Thomas Dewey was going to win, but he didn't. And that's how I sort of thought I would find South Korea and the results of that election. But once I started looking in very short order, I realized that there was something really wrong that had happened in South Korea, that in all likelihood the 2020 election had been stolen. And I have seen nothing in subsequent elections in 2022, 2024, and this most recent one to change my mind. You've seen the same things happen. Now, when I showed up in 2020, one of the people I talked to was the head of South Korea's equivalent of MIT. And he had looked at the statistical outcomes of the election. He said, look, either God did it or it was rigged. And this is someone immensely respected, knows his subject, and that's what he's saying. And at that point, you sit up and you start taking this very seriously. Additionally, there were claims of electronic manipulation, and to include the existence of Chinese parts in the NEC's computer networks. And the response from the National Election Commission was, it's irrelevant and our system can't be hacked. Well, fast forward to 2023, and the South Korean National Intelligence Service investigates the NEC's networks because North Korea's Lazarus Group had hacked it over the last couple years. And the South Korean NIS looks at it and read their report. You can do anything you want in that system to manipulate, to rig an election. I really encourage people to read that report. And 3 years earlier, the NEC had said, can't be hacked, and it's all irrelevant. Well, that suggests some real problems. Additionally, one of the sort of data points that I was told when I showed up was, well, yes, we have these really weird outcomes from early voting, where the leftists get huge amounts, the conservatives get very little. And on election day, it's reversed. What I was told was, well, it's because most young people support the leftists and they vote early, and most old people support the conservatives, and because they're conservatives, they vote on election day. However, at that time, the NEC, the government's official statistics showed that a majority of old people had voted on early voting day. And at this point, you're starting to think this is really problematic. And the facts were leading me to think that it had been rigged, and there's nothing I've seen ever since then to suggest otherwise. You see the pristine ballots that look like they just came out of the printing machine, already marked for one candidate for Lee. You see voting stations where votes are being cast at every 4.7 seconds. And in some cases, it's even faster. Now try to explain that away. You have more votes than voters who walked in, and you have citizens who are out there counting people going into the polling sites, and then you look at the NEC's official announcements. Well, that causes you some real concerns, and well, it should. You've seen the video of 3,000 plus votes all coming out on the tabulating machine for Lee, for the Democratic Party's candidate. Now, what do you say about that? And then you have the overseas vote in this last election, which was the biggest number of overseas votes they've ever had. It went about 99% for Lee Jae-myung. Now, this is like a Saddam Hussein Iraq election when you get these kind of figures. The mail-in votes as well in all of these elections. All you have to do is look at the time and the distance, at the routes these ballots took to get where they were supposed to go. And some honest Koreans actually did this. They looked at all of them, and it doesn't make sense. So, this is really, I would rather be somewhere else doing other things. But I feel based on what I have seen in my examinations of South Korean elections, that I have to be here just saying what I've seen. And the evidence is there. In fact, after 2020, we put out a 2-volume set of the evidence because we wanted to preserve it. We wanted to make sure it was concrete and that it was there to be examined. Since then, in every single election, I have never seen a single official body, government, or media actually look into the evidence. Not one. Instead, what you hear is, it's baseless, it's debunked, it's conspiracy theories. Well, I'm a former intelligence officer, and if anyone had ever told me, if I'd asked them, well, what's in that room? There's nothing to see there. Move along. Well, whenever someone says that, well, I know there's something really wrong there and it needs to have a look. So what should have been done is, and still can be done, is that anyone, a government, an intelligence service, the media, hire your own statistical experts to review the evidence and see what they come up with. You go and you talk to witnesses. You can assess their credibility by talking to them. Bring along your own experts as well. Look at the evidence, look at the charges, and start asking the NEC a lot of questions. If there's ever been a National Election Commission that violates every aspect of international election law and practice, and even South Korean election law, it's the NEC. There's absolutely nothing good that I can say about it, and I do consider it not just an aider and abetter, but rather but just directly involved in the wrongdoing here. So, you know, walking down the halls at the National Assembly, the National Press Club today, you see the pictures of some of these old-time reporters. And if any one of them had seen the evidence, seen what was going on in South Korea, they would have dug into it. But here we have a situation where the media, the foreign and Korean media, doesn't seem to show any evidence in this. And even the US government at some point is going to have to stop ignoring this issue. And what is going on in South Korea, where you have thousands of people out in the streets at midnight, and this is just today. When you have this happening, these are people who are defending consensual government or defending freedom. And I would suggest they're doing it on behalf of all of us. The problems in the South Korean election, they are certainly of real interest and relevance to South Korea, but they are something that decent, civilized people everywhere have to worry about if you do value your consensual government and freedom. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Colonel Newsom. What we have heard is this is not just a 2025 issue. This goes back through National Assembly elections, through the last 3 national elections in Korea. And thank you for that 2020 analysis, which sets the context for what we're talking about today. Today, we are very fortunate to have 2 analysts from Korea itself who will talk about the June 3rd election and what they observed and what they have learned afterwards. And the first one is former National Assembly member Min Chung-woo. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kyung-wook Min. I was one of the very first people to say loud and clear that South Korea's 2020 general election was rigged. I worked for 23 years at KBS, Korea's largest broadcaster. 3 of those years I spent right here in Washington, in this very building as a foreign correspondent. As a trained reporter, I saw what others missed: statistical evidence that was too clear to ignore. That evidence turned me into a fighter. For 5 years, I've led a movement traveling between Korea and the US to expose the truth and defend democracy. I wasn't just any candidate. I had served as a presidential spokesperson, a member of parliament, and the anchor of Korea's primetime news. I was confident I would win, but I lost. Why? Because the early vote and the election day vote didn't match. They violated the law of large numbers, a basic rule in statistics that ensures predictable results in big samples. These patterns didn't stop in 2020. They continued into the most recent presidential election. The numbers do not lie. What surprises me most is how little outrage we've seen from the Korean people. A people known for intelligence, talent, and courage. Have we grown numb? Have we been conditioned to believe this is the new normal? But there is no new normal in math. There is only truth. As you heard earlier, our last presidential election was also fraudulent. It was manipulated. Just like President Trump's victory was stolen 4 years ago, so was ours. And just like Americans fought to take it back, we are fighting too. But there's one key difference. In Korea, the rightful winner, Mr. Kim Moon-soo, concedes far too quickly. He gave up even before the counting was done. Maybe he couldn't believe it had been stolen. That's not a criticism. It's a tragedy. I've paid a heavy price for speaking up. The political left sued me. The media mocked me, called me crazy, called me a conspiracy theorist. Even fellow conservatives began to avoid me. Lifelong friends turned their backs. Only my family stayed with me, and they suffered for it too. Mr. Kim Moon-soo saw what I went through. Maybe that's why he hesitates to join us, and I understand that. But I still urge him, reconsider. You are a brave man. You left the far left and joined the right. Why be silent now? Maybe you think it's more humble to concede. But this isn't about pride. This is about crime. Election fraud is a crime. It destroys democracy. Accepting it encourages more of it. This is not just your fight, Mr. Kim. It's the people's fight. It's about every citizen's right to vote. So please, withdraw your concession and join us. In 2020, I flew to Washington to speak the truth, right here on this stage, at this podium. I stood alone. My words felt like a cry in the wilderness, but I still spoke. I even warned America, be aware or be next. And I was right. It took President Trump 4 years, but he's back. Today, I return to this same podium, but I'm not alone. I stand with President Trump, President Yoon of Korea, and former Prime Minister Hwang. I stand with Ambassador Morse Tan, Colonel John Mills, Colonel Grant Newsham, and Professor Bradley Thayer. History will remember them. Right now, it's 1 a.m. in Seoul, and yet patriots are gathered at Seoul Station. We're watching this press conference live. Their courage brought us here, and I'm especially moved by the young people in their 20s and 30s who are now standing up. They give me hope. But we must not forget those we lost. Over the last 5 years, 5 brave souls gave their lives in this fight. Kim Il-du, Kim Kwang-chan, Kim Jae-hong, Pastor Kim Tae-kwon, and Elder Kwon Tae-hun. 2 died from illness while leading the movement. 1 died in a suspicious crash. 2 set themselves on fire after exposing the truth. Let us never forget them. We are here because of them. Now, I speak directly to President Trump. America has spent hundreds of billions of dollars in Ukraine. But is Korea less important? Do we need bullets and bombs to recognize that a war is happening? China has taken control of Korea's government without firing a single shot. Can't we see this? President Lee Jae-myung didn't win by chance. This was a long strategy by the global communist movement. And now, as a puppet of Beijing, he will sell out Korean sovereignty. Yesterday was the 75th anniversary of the Korean War. 36,000 Americans died to protect Korea's freedom. That freedom is now slipping away. President Trump, you know what election fraud looks like. Now it's happening to your allies. Please act, and act soon. And to Congress, don't see this as just a Korean problem. This is a global crisis. Hold hearings. investigate the Chinese influence that threatens both of our nations. 5 years ago, I received a calling from God to expose this fraud. That calling sent me into this long, hard fight, and I've never turned back. Under God's providence, may every effort to uncover the truth be blessed. Thank you very much.
Courage is the foundation of every democracy. It is the foundation of our democracy here. It is the foundation of Korea's democracy. And we have just seen a demonstration of courage. And that courage gives all of us inspiration and hope. So thank you so much, Mr. Min, for this demonstration of courage. And now it's my honor to introduce Park Joo-chun, another person who will talk to us about the election. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to see you. This is my first English presentation in my life. Global election fraud changed my life, changed my fortunes. Prior to the presentations, yesterday was the 75th anniversary of the Korean War. As I watched the ceremony at the Korean War Veteran Memorial Day, next to the Lincoln Memorial, I was deeply moved by the fact that more than 36,000 American soldiers gave their lives for Korea. I would like to once again express my heartfelt gratitude to the United States for defending Korea's freedom with their blood. I prepared PPT, look at the monitors, and first, yes. On June 3rd, 2025, South Korea lost its sovereignty through an election fraud operation led by China and pro-China forces. Next. I'm a South Korean lawyer who has served as special inspector to the president at the Blue House, a professor at the National Tax Service Institution, and a chief staff to the deputy speaker of the National Assembly. And I served as a commissioner at the Seoul Election Commission. There are whistleblowers within the National Election Commission. I too pointed out that the NEC's official ballot count did not match the numbers recorded by monitoring teams, and that there were massive discrepancies between early voting and the election day result. When my warnings were ignored, I resigned, stating I could no longer serve in a corrupt organization. Park Dong-gun, a former NEC employee, also filmed a video 1 month before his death, confessing to former Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-an that the NEC had been continuously involved in election fraud. Han Sung-cheon, former chair of the NEC's labor union, also stated that the NEC was orchestrating election fraud. These are all whistleblower accounts, but the election crime cartel covered them up. The Chinese Communist Party and pro-China forces stole control of the National Assembly through fraudulent elections. They stole the parliament. Next. Former President Yoon Suk-yeol stated that there was overwhelming evidence of fraud and that the powerful forces were blocking the truth. He explained that it was not the work of a single party, but of an international election crime cartel involving China. This massive cartel ultimately impeached the president who had exposed the election fraud. Next. On election days, Kim Moon-soo won by a wider margin. However, in early voting, out-of-district voting, and overseas voting, Lee Jae-myung won by a landslide. This outcome is statistically impossible. In the overseas vote, Kim won in only one district, losing in all 252 others. It's impossible. Next. Many citizens are now aware of the fraud and are taking to the streets across the country, shouting. Next. Stop the steal. China and pro-China forces already have a significant control over South Korea. We need America's help. Together, we must defend freedom and democracy. China hacked SKT, South Korea's largest telecom provider, and stole the personal data of 27 million citizens, more than half the population. There is a strong suspicion that this data was used to forge IDs and manipulate the election. Next. The wireless network used for mail-in voting was operated by the hacked company, SKT. This time they changed KT2 from KT to SKT. And the Chinese-made switch hubs were used at early voting stations. Next. As FBI Director Kash Patel reported, South Korea also has evidence of Chinese nationals, pro-China agents, and spies voting with post IDs. The cases in Korea and the US are strikingly similar. Next. Nationwide, there have been hundreds of reports of voters being told they had already voted, likely meaning their IDs were stolen. The real number could be in tens of thousands. Yes. Videos of voting have been uploaded to Chinese platforms like Douyin and Kuaishou apps used only in China. This 재생 그 누르면 될 거. push the button. Play button. 그래, 예. Yes. Kuaishou apps used only in China. These videos all show ballots marked for candidate number 1, pro-China Lee Jae-myung. On election work, next. On election work was caught red-handed committing double voting. An audit revealed that every career hire and at the NEC over the past 10 years were illegally recruited. This criminal NEC even filed a complaint against the former Prime Minister and presidential candidate Hwang Kyo-an during the campaign, just for raising the issue of election fraud. Many citizens do not accept Lee Jae-myung as a real president. We think he is a fake president. Hwang Kyo-an was the first to declare the election fraudulent. On June 23, 2025, candidate number 8, Song, along with 11,400 40 people filed a lawsuit to nullify the election results. Next. Due to inflated vote counts, some districts showed voting speeds that would require people to run faster than Usain Bolt just to cast their votes on time. Next. At 13 polling stations, voting was completed in under 5 seconds, and 760 stations within 10 seconds, despite ballot printing alone taking more than 10 seconds. This is impossible, absolutely impossible. Next. In specific time frames, country stations recorded voting speeds of just 2 to 3 seconds per person. It's absolutely impossible. Next. Stacks of ballots appeared steep, like a press banknote. However, early voting ballots are originally rolled, and must be covered. They're never flat. A steep platform is physically impossible. Barcode analysis revealed mismatches between the issuance time and actual delivery time of ballot, evidence of forgery. Ballot from election held 1, 2, 3 years ago also appeared in the June 3rd election. Likely, we think it's a remnant from a counterfeit ballot factory. Next. These steep, unported ballots are characteristic of Chinese-style voting. Look at that voting. Yes, where ballots are cast flat without folding. No one can like this in Korea. We Koreans never vote like this. Although the law allows only one vote per person, bundles of ballots folded together as if by a single hand were found nationwide. This is evidence of mass ballot stuffing using forgery. Next. Mail-in vote is a blind spot of oversighting, blind for surveillance. Many tracking numbers reveal inconsistent routes and times, suggesting that the post office may be a core part of the election fraud. Next. On electronic counting monitors, ballots for candidate number 1, Lee Jae-myung, appeared more than 10,000 or even 3,000 times consecutively. 재생. Play. It's impossible. This could only happen if massive quantities of forged ballots marked for number 1 were inserted. Next. Yeah. Blank ballots were being counted for candidate number 1, Lee Jae-myung. Look. Yes. This indicates that electronic voting counting machines were manipulated to favor a specific candidate. And next, numerous ballot boxes were found with broken seals. In some places, in Incheon Micheol and Gyeonggi Namyangju, 9 recorded boxes became 10. One more. It's impossible. But in Korea, possible. Some were found abandoned on the streets, and the official vote records were found in trash bins. These are clear and undeniable pieces of evidence of election fraud. Over 80% of Korean citizens dislike China, and over 90% are favorable toward the United States of America. Among my 170,000 YouTube subscribers, my subscribers 100% oppose China and support US. The problem lies with the CCP and pro-China politicians. If we eliminate them by eradicating election fraud, South Korea can stand again as a strong US ally, pro-US ally. Next. 75 years ago, during the Korean War, the United States defended Korea's freedom with blood. Today, South Korea can support the US through semiconductors, shipbuildings, military strength, national security, and geopolitics. Yes. Let us fight and overcome communism together to defend freedom. May God bless USA and Korea. Save Korea, please. Thank you.
Attorney Park has tied together a number of themes. He's documented the irregularities and what was impossible in the voting on June 3. But I turned back to something he also said. He talked about China. And remember, Ambassador Tan started us off by discussing the Chinese theory of global governance, that they are the only legitimate state in the world. And we see what they are doing in Korea to implement their grand design to take over every place. Thank you, Attorney Park. What we're going to do now is open this up to questions and answers. So please, who wants to be first?
So please, if you have a question, please state your name, affiliation, and ask the question, not make a statement. So in interest of time. So name, affiliation, and question. So please raise your hand if you'd like to ask any of the panelists here sitting at the table a question.
Right over there.
Go up, but yeah, okay.
My name is Paul Kim, Korean name is Hyun-Guk Kim, retired pastor. Okay. I was retired pastor I came down this morning from Harrisburg to here.
Thank you for doing
some of them that Dr. Mortan and Connor Grant Newsom and Mingyong 의원님. I met both in Philadelphia and Dallas, Texas. I'm so glad to meet you again. Now we found many evidences. What's the problem? First of all, we have to know many difficulties comes from many bad persons. Who are the bad persons? Lee Jae-myung and his core group, Korea. That bad persons, their policies are wrong. I call them just like watermelon persons. Watermelon inside is red, outside is green. They are different inside and outside. Inner person and outside person is different. We have to figure out them. So make sure here we all of them. Who are they? They are wrong persons. Wrong persons and the followers of the Satan. What is their character? They are liar. They say some words are true, but it's not different. Inside is wrong.
Sir, do you have a question? We have
Yes. Yes. That we have to know that what's the key issues, relationship to Lee Jae-myung administration to China and North Korea. And what should we do for that one? And Lee Jae-myung and his party overcome that Yoon Suk-yeol administration for the, what is Neranje? What in English that? Installation, yeah. They are really installation.
Colonel Mills, could you answer this question?
Well, thank you, Pastor. And what you notice here, and this is something in our report, is the commonality of language and tactics and techniques in South Korea, but also in America. That word insurrectionist, that's no coincidence. And we do identify, and there's reasonable concern, that the U.S. Democrat Party is coordinating with the South Korean Democrat Party. So it's Communist China, it's globalists, and it's the American Democrat Party who want to throw elections because they can't stand populists and conservatives, but a commonality of language. And it's no surprise, not accusing former President Clinton of, but he was suspiciously inside of South Korea. I think it's reasonable to, since we now have established a basis and a predicate for legal and intelligence activities to investigate, we probably need to know what were Americans doing to manipulate the election. But that word insurrectionist has legal meaning inside the U.S. No coincidence it was used in South Korea.
Brad, would you like to talk about this as well?
Well, certainly, Gordon. Thank you for the opportunity. Pastor, thank you very much indeed for the question. What we're witnessing, of course, is a tremendous danger where, as a result of what North Korea and the Chinese Communist Party was not able to achieve in 1950 to 1953 through bullets, they're attempting to achieve today through fraudulent ballots, through election interference. And we cannot allow what they failed to achieve in the Korean War and after to be achieved through political warfare tactics by the manipulation of electoral processes. It's a global problem, as Ambassador Tan identified at the outset, as Gordon has stressed, and other of my colleagues have stressed as well. And we hope very much indeed that steps that President Trump has taken to call for a special counsel and for investigations in America's electoral history might provide, if you will, a dam breaking and evidence to come forth of manipulation that would be very useful in the South Korean case. The CCP is expert at political warfare. They found that manipulation of causing fraudulent elections, in essence, has been very valuable for them as they expand their power globally. And it's time now to call them out and to put them on the back foot by identifying the means that they're doing that and terminating those means. And specifically in the South Korean case, that involves breaking and ending the opacity of the NEC, which is a source, as my colleagues have stressed and I did, of enormous problems in ensuring that elections are free, fair, and transparent in South Korea. Thank you.
Next question.
We'll go with Sehun Kim. He raised his hand first. So state your name and affiliation and question.
Hi, Sehun Kim. I'm a managing editor at Global StratView and currently a White House correspondent. There are three quick questions, and last question will be directed towards you, Gordon.
Thanks for the warning.
Thank you. The first two questions are, have there been any communication with the Trump administration since January, or even before, possibly? And number two, what are the immediate steps that the Trump administration or any other like-minded governments around the world, as you mentioned, allies, can do on the immediate sense? Let me emphasize that. And then on the third, Gordon, and maybe others on the panel as well who might be an expert on this issue, is that there has been conversations regarding this, for those who are aware, that this is one of China's ways to secure it to the rest of Asia, in East Asia, rest of Asia, including the Indo-Pacific, to secure their eventual takeover to Taiwan. As you know, China is a long-term player in this region. They know that administrations change and mindsets change in the United States. So would you validate that claim, or if you don't, would you care to explain why? And would you also agree that South Korea and Japan are the frontline, the most valuable territories that the CCP can take over in terms of their influence in order to achieve their goal? Thank you.
Morris, would you take the first two questions?
Sure, and I'd be glad if others want to add their thoughts as well. I think the executive order in regards to the 2020 election and FBI Director Kash Patel's investigation into the election cheating that happened in 2020 in the United States could very well be, and has promised to be, the breaking of a dam where you have a concrete barrier that keeps a whole mass of water, but if you break the dam and all the water comes gushing out, that is what we're looking to happen. President Trump could sure use his team in places like South Korea. I think a last-minute Biden plant and deep state leftists are not a substitute for the president having his people in place in South Korea. I think the president is very focused, it seems to me, on countering the malign influence of the Chinese Communist Party. And as he's able to see what is happening here in places like South Korea, in Japan, what may happen in Taiwan and such, as has been very aptly put before, just because nobody is firing weapons doesn't mean that there isn't warfare going on. You have gray zone warfare going on big time right now, and Korea is a huge battleground with respect to that. And so I think the more that is recognized, the more that can be countered, that would be better. If there's a special prosecutor that's named, if there's a commission that's named, if there is an enforcement of U.S. sanctions and UN sanctions against Lee Jae-myung for the $8 million that he sent. I mean, look, his two closest associates when he was governor have already been convicted in South Korea. And to say, oh, he wasn't involved, his two closest associates just did it on their own, I doubt that. I don't think that is true. And it's one thing to have sanctions, it's another thing to enforce them. And I think it would be very important to enforce them and therefore to sanction Lee Jae-myung for breaking U.S. and UN sanctions. Those are a few thoughts.
Mr. Min, would you like to talk about South Korea and its allies?
지금 질문은 대만과 한국 중국이 영향력을 펴가는 과정에 중국이 어떤 역할을 하고 한국의 그 선거 부정에 어떤 영향을 미쳤는지에 대해서 이제 물어보신 걸로 알고 있습니다. 우리가 선거를 하면서 그 안에 그 어느 나라가 부정을 저질렀는지에 대한 이 증거를 잡기가 굉장히 어려웠죠. 처음부터 우리가 중국이 우리나라의 선거 부정에 관여했다고 생각은 하지 않고 있었습니다. 그런데 선거 직전에 그 민주당의 양정철이라는 민주연구원장이 수시로 중국을 드나들면서 중국 그 텐센트 같은 그 빅테크와 MOU를 맺고 있다는 것, 다음에 그 텐센트 앞에 있는 중국 공산당의 모토인 영원 근당주, 그러니까 영원히 당과 함께하자, Follow the party forever, 그런 문자열이 이스터 에그처럼 이 민주당 후보들이 얻은
그 수열에 감춰져 있다는 것이 발견된 다음에 이제 깜짝 놀라면서 중국의 영향력 또 중국이 뭐 전쟁 없이 이 한국의 주권을 빼앗으려고 한다는 것을 우리가 이제 거기에 생각이 미치게 됐습니다. 옛날에는 이 중국이 한국의 정치적 영향력을 미치려고 할 때는 이미 당선된 사람들에게 많은 돈을 주어서 중국에 유리한 정책을 끌어내려고 노력을 했었는데 지금은 그게 바뀌어서 그건 돈이 많이 들기 때문에 이 후보들 가운데 중국에 좀 가까운 그런 후보들을 당선시키는 것으로 그 전략을 바꾸고 있습니다. 이제 그런 무서운 일들이 벌어지고 있다는 것을 이제 알게 됐고요. 한국과 미국이 같은 동맹국으로서 자유민주주의를 누리고 있는데 그 양국의 선거 시스템을 통해서 양국의 공히 부정선거를 통한 자유민주주의의 이 자유주의 붕괴를 꾀하고 있다는 사실을 이제 알게 됐죠. 한국과 미국이 협동을 해서 막아야 되는 그런 이유라고 생각을 합니다.
Sehun, you asked a question which goes really to critical developments, not only in East Asia, but elsewhere. At this moment, we see China being chased out of the Middle East. In the last few months, it's lost friends, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and of course, Syria. And right now, it's losing its main proxy in the region, Iran. But at the same time, what it's doing is pressuring Taiwan and the Philippines. And this is something which is, I think, dangerous in the sense that the United States, of course, is involved so much now in the Middle East that the question is, are we going to be able to cover our commitments in East Asia? I believe we will, but we'll have fewer assets there, as we saw with the U.S. Navy taking the Nimitz, which had been in the South China Sea, and sending it over to the Middle East. So this is an important time. We know that China, with its flights starting on the 19th of this month, have been pressuring Taiwan. 61 planes have crossed the median line, which is the unofficial boundary between China and Taiwan, which goes right down the middle of the Taiwan Strait. China sending planes to the east side of that boundary is an especially provocative act, and the United States has got to be concerned that China will see an opportunity. One other thing, Xi Jinping has this sort of view that if China creates chaos around the world, it will eventually lead to worldwide Chinese rule. He got that from his hero, Mao Zedong. And what we are seeing with China, especially backing Iran, backing Russia, causing all sorts of insurgencies in North Africa, is creating this chaos. And we've got to be especially vigilant because China might decide to create chaos also in East Asia. And that's what the stakes are.
So Mr. Min answered that we originally had thought that CCP didn't directly intervene in the South Korean election, but more and more time passed, we came to know that Korean companies and ministers of South Korea had involved themselves by signing MOU with big techs of China, including Tencent. And the code, such as be with the party, follow the party forever, was hidden in the column showing the number of votes the Democratic Party received. And we are shifting, or China is shifting their strategy to getting candidates who are closer to China elected. We came to realize that such frightening things are happening as allied nations, South Korea and the United States, both uphold liberal democracy, but we have come to understand that both countries are facing attempts to undermine liberal democracy through election fraud. And that is why I believe Korea and the United States must work together to stop this.
And Mr. Ha raised your hand, so we'll go with Mr. Ha, Asia Today. Your name, affiliation, and question.
Hello, my name is Manju Ha, correspondent for the Asia Today. Ambassador Morris Dan has already answered to my question. As you know, the potential election fraud is very difficult a problem to understand for the people. Even for me, it's very difficult. So I heard that Patel's FBI had started to investigate the potential election fraud in election 2020. You Could you elaborate a little more? The investigation could be connected to the potential election fraud in Korea, the 22 election.
Yes, as I was saying, what is happening is not limited to even just Korea and the United States, right? You have through AWEB 109 countries, right? But all these things, people need to see the connections, right? Why was there a Korean air flight coming full of people who are not US citizens with fake IDs coming to somewhere like, say, Arizona for the US 2020 election, right? These are the sorts of things that Patel is uncovering, and I think it's very helpful that is the case. Another thing that I want to say in general, you said that election fraud is hard to understand. I would say exactly. It is a red flag when it's so complicated that's hard to understand. A clean, fair, transparent election is so simple that even an elementary school kid should be able to understand it. Like, what is hard to understand if you have same day, in-person, paper ballot voting? Let's just take that, for example. That's very clean, simple. That's like the approach that Taiwan takes. Taiwan has clean elections. It's easy, simple. I mean, is there anything hard to understand about what I just said? On the same day, in person, paper ballots, and that are verified. Let's just take those four things. That's very simple to understand, very simple to see. If it's so complicated, if it's lacking transparency, if it's really convoluted, that's a red flag. That's a red flag. And so underneath all that will be a lot of election fraud and garbage, usually.
You know, President Trump, Morse, has talked about paper ballots for the United States. And in Taiwan, nobody complains about election fraud because the ballots are not counted by election workers in big rooms that are sealed off. They're counted in front of everybody, people from all the candidates and from the public. So everybody has the identical count. That's very important. Grant, you talked about fraud in the 2020 election in Korea. Do you see the same patterns in 2020 as you saw in 2025?
Yes, that's one thing you notice is that the same things that I found in 2020, you saw them in 2022, 2024, and 2025. The same specifics. If anything, there's even more evidence now because Korean citizens have actually realized the danger, and they have done a good job of organizing themselves and putting themselves in place to actually monitor what is going on. So the evidence is there. You've seen some of it on the videos. But nonetheless, citizens can only do so much. And it does require actually an honest government, an honest electoral commission, and more than anything else, an aggressive media, aggressive press that sees its job as digging up corruption. And without all that, there's only so much citizens can do, and sometimes even little support from overseas, from elsewhere, can be helpful. One notes that one was hoping that before the election that there would at least be a favorable reference made by somebody in the Trump administration to the idea of honest, consensual governments. That's all it had to be. And honest, consensual elections, fair elections, just had to say that. Maybe it's not too late, but it would have been nice to have that come before, because you do that and you're giving oxygen to people who are just trying to defend their government, their society, their system. And if you don't, well, the bad guys who are conducting the wrongdoing, well, they see, well, nobody else is interested. We're not going to get caught. So even small messages, small words can make a big difference. And that is something that would have been nice to have seen ahead of time. But as I said, what I saw in 2020, it's the same stuff. It's just a little better documented now, and it takes a real effort to ignore the evidence. And, you know, as I've seen so many people who just say, baseless debunked. Well, did you look? No. Well, how do you know? Well, it's baseless debunked. Well, did you look? No. I think you see some of the sort of idiocy which is going on, and there's a willful ignorance that we're seeing.
Attorney Park, you talked a lot about the mechanics of the election fraud. Your comments, please.
I can tell you, 2025년 6월 3일 대통령 선거는 상당히 특수한. I'm sorry. 그 6월 3일 이번 2025년 대선은 아주 특수한 특성이 있습니다. 무엇이냐면은 다른 선거와는 달리 선거가 끝나고 나면은 바로 대통령으로 그러니까 대통령으로 취임을 해서 바로 수행을 하는 그런 특성이 있기 때문에 그동안에 있었던 모든 선거에서의 부정 방법을 이번에는 총동원했습니다. 그래서 곳곳마다 선거인 수와 투표 수가 다르고 뭐 지금 투표함이 뜯어진 것들이 곳곳에 발견되고 그 우편 투표 배송 경로도 다르고 그냥 모든 증거들이 다 남아 있습니다. 이들은 분명히 이걸 막기 위해서 또 그 시민들 탄압을 할 것인데 이번에는 너무나 많은 증거들이 그냥 순식간에 등장을 해버려 가지고 국민들이 지금 일어나고 있습니다. 지금 그 서울역에는 엄청나게 많은 사람들이 지금 이 기자회견을 보려고 하고 있습니다. 많은 국민들이 부정선거에 분노하고 있고 수많은 증거들이 세상에 폭로가 되고 또 오늘을 시발점으로 해서 아마 그 이재명을 가짜 대통령으로 생각하는 국민들이 너무 많아가지고 끌어내려야 하겠지 않을까라는 여론이 아주 커질 것으로 생각합니다.
The 2025 presidential election has a very distinct characteristic. Unlike other elections, the elected president isn't inaugurated and begins carrying out duties immediately after the election ends. Because of this unique aspect, every fraudulent method used in past elections was mobilized this time. As a result, discrepancies between the number of registered voters and votes cast are found across various regions. Tempered ballot boxes are being discovered in many places. Standard ballot delivery routes differ. And all the evidence remains. A huge crowd is currently trying to watch this press conference at Seoul Station, and this time around, it is vastly different than previous ones because so many people have awakened. Many citizens are outraged by the election fraud, and countless pieces of evidence are being exposed to the public. Starting with today, I believe public opinion will rapidly grow around the idea that Lee Jae-myung is a fake president and that he must be removed, as so many people already view him that way.
그 하나 더 특징이 있는데 뭐냐면 이번 사전 투표소에 중국인들이 많이 출몰을 했고 사전 투표소에 중국인 관광 버스들이 많이 등장했습니다. 그러니까 이 아까 SKT 위조 신분증 얘기를 했는데 위조 신분증을 통하여 대규모 투표를 하지 않았나 이렇게 생각을 하고 있습니다.
And there were many Chinese tourism buses caught just right during the time of election day in South Korea. So we see and we have gathered much evidence for a lot of Chinese people directly involving and intervening this year's election.
This is such an important point that Attorney Park made and also Grant made about the involvement of people in their own elections. Got one more question?
So we'll take our last question from Mr. Don Kirk. He was at our May 27th Seoul press conference, and he's here at the DC press conference. So thank you very much.
Actually, just got here a few days ago from Korea, as have most of you, I think. These charges of election fraud are getting very little traction in Korea, to be honest. It's not a topic of widespread conversation, despite what you may believe and what you apparently have been led to believe. People are accepting that government. It's there and it's doing its thing. How do you think you can awaken people, or what do you think? Well, even the typical Saturday demonstrations are petered out. There's a pastor, a well-known pastor, who makes these impassioned speeches, but I think people are getting quite tired of him. So how are you going to keep this discussion going, or maybe it will not keep going? What's your outlook for that?
Colonel Mills?
Yeah, Don, what Korea is going through is a microcosm of what America went through for 4 years. And I'm sorry, Don, that's exactly what we had to do. And it took us 4 years for us to drive the message home, and the American people responded. So I wouldn't take that as, oh, well, people aren't listening. You got a corrupt media in Korea. Sorry, you do. Okay? That's what we had to face in America. But we actually had to change that 10, 15, 20 years ago. That's the challenge. You still have a real captured, controlled legacy media that really works with the government to tamp down any kind of alternative viewpoint. Welcome to our world. That's what we had to do and change. Legacy media is now dead in America, but it's a microcosm of what we had to go through. And we just kept pushing every day. We put our shoulder to the wheel, and we just kept on pushing.
Mr. Min.
Yes. 그 티핑 포인트가 있을 텐데요. 지금 박근혜 대통령의 탄핵 때부터 광화문 광장은 태극기 부대의 그 시위로 난리가 났었습니다. 그런데 아무도 그걸 이제 보도하지 않았고 또 그 노인들의 시위일 뿐이라고 이제 얘기를 해서 이렇게 가두어 놨었습니다. 그런데 지금 좀 달라진 게요. 대통령이 부정선거에 대해서 이야기를 하고 대통령이 부정선거를 밝히기 위해서 계엄을 발표를 했습니다. 그래서 많은 사람들이 계몽이 됐고 특히 20대, 30대, 20, 30대 젊은이들이 거기에 가담하기 시작했고 지금 서울역에 이 시간에 서울역에 빡빡한 사람들이 모여서 이 부정선거와 관련한 우리 감시단의 기자회견을 생방송으로 지켜보고 있습니다. 그들은 우리를 가두고 아무 일도 아니라고 얘기를 하고 싶겠지만 지금 이런 분들 세계적으로 부정선거 문제에 정통한 전문가 분들께서 한국을 방문하고 또 미국의 수도 워싱턴에서 이런 기자회견을 여는 것 이런 것은 과거에 볼 수 없었던 일이기 때문에 분명한 돌파구가 마련될 것이라고 저는 믿고 있습니다.
Since I see this as a tipping point, and since the impeachment of Park Geun-hye, Gwanghwamun Square has been in an uproar with protests centered around the taegukgi, which is a Korean flag stage, but no one reported on it, and it was dismissed as just protest by the elderly, effectively silencing it. What's different now is that the president is speaking out about election fraud and has even declared martial law to uncover the truth behind it. And what's different this time is that a lot of young people in their 20s and 30s, they have awakened. And there are so many people at Seoul Station gathered right now, determined, and they're intense and filling up the space to promote and protest for irregularities that they have all witnessed through this election.
Don, do you have a quick follow-up?
I have a follow-up on a rather different subject. I'm interested in this money that went to North Korea for that Lee Jae-myung, when he was governor, I think, of Gyeonggi Province, somehow got money into North Korea. Is there any follow-up to what's going on about that now? And will he actually wind up having a summit with Kim Jong-un in return for his donation, or I don't know how $8 million, which in comparison to what Kim Dae-jung passed to North Korea is very little. Kim Dae-jung passed 500 million, some as a minimum, probably more like 1 or 2 or 3 billion. But he passed a mere 8 million for starters to North Korea. How is this going to play out? Is this going to bring about a North-South summit?
Ambassador Tan.
So my understanding is that 8 million was to meet with lower North Korean officials. And so that's what it bought for Lee Jae-myung. We're talking about somebody who has had 12 lawsuits filed against him, 5 that are still going on. And at the same time, you have a corrupt system in place where you have the National Assembly passing a law saying, oh, he cannot be prosecuted as president unless he's exonerated. Now, what kind of legislation is that? where you announce in the legislature what the result of a court case is going to be or has to be in order to be able to move forward. That is nonsense. In the US, even the President of the United States is not above the criminal law. And you have all these cases that are being illegitimately either delayed, slow-rolled, or dismissed in South Korea. And this is a real problem. And there are even reports, for example, and this I don't think has gotten a lot of coverage, but it is said that Lee Jae-myung, as a youth, was involved in gang raping and murdering a young lady, and as a result was put in juvenile detention, and therefore was not able to attend junior high and high school.
Okay.
You didn't answer my question about the prospect for a summit with Kim Jong-un. That was my question.
Well, I said what the $8 million was for.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can ask a follow-up question later. Yeah.
Now it is my great honor and great pleasure to announce an address from President Wong at Seoul Station.
Still! Stop! 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 Still! Still! Stop! Still! Stop! Still! Stop! Still!
I think they're trying to contact him now. Prime Minister Hwang.
So we will close out the press conference with a short message from former Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-won.
There he is.
이번 시작되는 것 같습니다. 잠깐 조용히 해주시면 좋겠습니다. 황교안입니다. 이번 시작되는 것 같습니다. 잠깐 조용히 해주시면 좋겠습니다.
황교안입니다. 제가 말씀을 마무리 짓겠습니다.
황교안 from Seoul Station. Let me wrap up today.
오늘 저는 이 밤이 너무 감격스럽습니다. 한국과 미국이 함께하는 날입니다.
I rejoice today as united with the United States.
어떤 부정선거에도 불구하고 정의는 결국 승리합니다. 그동안은 우리가 여기서 싸웠으나 이제는 미국과 함께 동지들과 함께하게 되었기 때문에 우리는 반드시 승리하게 될 것입니다.
We haven't standing here alone, but now as we stand together with our counterparts in the United States, we'll be together. We'll be able to be victorious. We will win this fight.
대선에 비롯한 모든 미국의 동지들에게 감사의 말씀을 드리고 오늘 이 자리에 함께하신 우리 모두에게 정말 감사하다는 말씀을 드립니다. 수고 많으셨습니다.
I'd like to thank all of you there, including Ambassador Tan. I'd like to give you my heartfelt thanks to you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister Wong. As we heard today, especially from Don, this is not going to be easy. This is a struggle. But as we heard from Colonel Mills, sometimes the solution is not immediate, but eventually things work out well. But let us remember, whether easy or hard, this is a fight between freedom and oppression. This is a fight between democracy and tyranny. This is a fight between good and evil. And I know that we will win because we stand together. We fight together. We go together. We are brothers and sisters, and we will prevail. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our press conference. Let's give another big round of applause to our panelists. And another round of applause to our moderator, Gordon Chang. Thank you very much. Tonight at 6 p.m. at the Korean Community Center, there will be a Korean community meet and greet event, 동포 간담회 at 6 p.m. And then on Monday, June 30th, in Congress, 2 p.m., we will have the info up on the CPAC website for the congressional briefing. Thank you very much.
Hey, okay. Thank you.
Good job. Thank you. My first English.
Thank you, Mr. Park. It was outstanding. Thank you, sir.
It was a lot better than my first Korean presentation.
Oh, really? We're planning to address
Thank you.
데뷔전. Congressional briefing on June 30th.
감사합니다.
I think it's open. And then also we know various people that we're trying to communicate to get to the White House. Yeah, we're trying. We're they're trying. Yeah. Yes. You're welcome.
사진 한번 찍어야 돼.
Oh, unfortunately, I didn't bring any.
네, 제가 아까 다 했습니다. 말씀하신 대로.
Hey, say who? Say who?
Good.
Hey, say who? How you doing, brother? Good to see you.
Did you get my email?
Yeah, do you have this book? Do you want it?
Yes.
I have a copy already.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you. I have a meeting with Caroline. Okay. You've got to go, right? So.
No, but what I wanted to see is what are some of the points that I can see in Strong. I mean, I took a few photos and videos, but I just want to be able to tell. I might be able to get this to Stephen Chung.
Try to dispel lies with the truth.
Security. Take
and
this
try to
away.
let
Take
more
this
people
away.
know.
Here.
Using
Here you go.
media or social media.
So the executive summary
is another way.
right here.
as well.
Yeah.